networking seems to me, Mark, if you're, and I might be in the minority here, but if I'm an older worker, arguably I know more people and I'm better connected. Is that the hang up or the obstacle that the older or midlife executive might experience, or is it some other aspect of networking that could be in their way? What's your sense about that?
It's probably a combination. First, I think it's important to recognize that networking probably has the likelihood of 3 times greater where your next opportunity is going to come from. And it may be first somebody you know, somebody who knows somebody, or third generation who knows somebody there. I think it's how one often looks at networking when you're older. I've heard this from the folks I work with, so maybe a little bit embarrassed to step out to the network and say, hey, I'm out there and, I need your help. And I said, well, maybe you're going about it in maybe not the optimum way. And that could be part of the hesitancy. So yeah, the fact that you've been around a bit might mean you have connected with a number of people, but often you might have not kept in contact with those folks. So here's the thing, how do you approach it? First of all, make a list of those those you've worked with, those you had a good relationship with. And the approach is important. It's a little bit, I think, again, this goes back to the defensive versus the offensive. Defensive, oh, I don't want to ask anybody for help. But how about asking people that I value your opinion of the marketplace? We used to work together. I think you had a great view of, the industrial environment. And, now I'm stepping back and looking out at different opportunities out there. And I'd really value, what you see happening. Could we spend some time on the phone, Zoom, talking? So I think it's how you approach it. First, the idea is reconnect. Second, use that as a source of intelligence. It's not going out and asking necessarily for handouts or can you help me find the job specifically. Yeah, that's maybe under it, but there's different ways of positioning it. So I think some of that explains the hesitancy out there. It's not just networking, knowing why you're doing it and knowing how to do it well is important. And then in that discussion, when it's appropriate, be clear about, here's the types of opportunities I'm out there looking at. I mean, what's your sense of that? How are those playing out? Any types of industries I should add to the list. Oh, and by the way, with these types of companies, anybody you might know that would be worth me connecting with. You're trying to multiply your network. Even if you're well connected, you're trying to build upon that. And the last piece I would end in, even before you have those conversations, go on LinkedIn. See who that person is connected with you're talking to. And come in with your homework done, and then just see how you could start connecting the dots. And that's where you start really getting the engine going of networking done well that'll help lead you to the promised land of finding that next inroad to an opportunity.
Mark, I'm sorry, Harriet, Mark mentioned LinkedIn. We'll come back to LinkedIn in a moment, but let's talk about COVID a bit. Now, we've been displaced in countless ways, and certainly we're unable to network with people in person, at least not yet for most of us. So what do you do? This is more of a generic question, but where do you go and what do you do about networking, given that physically you can't get together with people the way you used to? You're on mute, Harriet.
I now unmuted? Yes. Okay, good. I hit the button too many times. There's an awful lot of networking that has continued online, including conferences and those sorts of things. And it's really no different than networking or going to a networking event. A conference, as an example, will oftentimes share their attendee list. And going through that attendee list, much like Mark described, you might find that you have some level of connections to some of those individuals. And so reaching out to them ahead of time or after, whichever makes sense, that I see you attended the such and such conference, or perhaps it's writing one of the presenters with a question ahead of time or afterwards with a compliment and a question. But networking is reciprocal. So there is that give and take. And so to offer something, even if it's a compliment, your observation, what you've learned, and then ask for something that's not, I'm in the market and I want a job, kind of an inquiry, but something that will establish the relationship. I can tell you that I read an article that was posted on LinkedIn about a promotion that a woman had received at Chevron. And I used to work at Amoco, now BP, many years ago. And I commented on the article first and congratulated her with the promotion. And then I reached out to her on LinkedIn. She was a second level connection and said, I just saw the article. Congratulations again. Here's why I'm celebrating you. I used to be, in Amoco years ago. She accepted my connection. So it established a little bit of a rapport. Then later on, I was invited to a chat, just a mini session there that we're going to talk about COVID implications. And she was one of the panelists. So I attended and wrote her again afterwards about how much I enjoyed that, and specifically one of the points that or stories that she shared. So not that I'm in the job market, but if I had someone that might be interested in a Chevron that called me or asked me if I knew anyone, I really feel comfortable that I could reach out to her and introduce someone if that's the case. So that's what I mean by reciprocal relationships. Begin to establish them early on and nurture them so that as you need them, the relationships are there.
Yeah. And if I might just play off of that, similar, just personal story, networking, going back, talking to people I used to work with, who used to work for me. To the person who asked the question about 66, I want to let you know I landed my last corporate Fortune 40 job at the age of 66. So that'll fly in the face of you cannot, be hired older with a large company. That came by way of networking with somebody who used to work for me years earlier. And we were having lunch because I reached out to connect. I like to stay in touch. And he was talking about now he's a director and he's starting up a new set of responsibilities. And we started talking about a role. And I said, boy, that sounds like a consulting role. He says, it is. I said, I'd love doing that. Mark, you would do that? I mean, you wouldn't be in charge. You wouldn't be the leader. You'd be working for people who work for people who used to work for you. And I said, yeah, I've been there, done it. I've already got my leadership t-shirt. I got the website. I love consulting. I love working with teams. And I was hired, 66. So it goes back to networking, and it goes back to the question I posed, what are you looking for? What's the value you bring? What type of positions will you accept? All because you're the CEO, do you need to be the CEO again? So be real thoughtful of the value and what would make you excited, and that made me excited, and I carried on with a little bit of pride too. Yeah, usually the oldest person in the room where I'm there, but it works.
And what Mark just
happy endings.
Described, I think, is another really thoughtful way in the door where you really can help an organization. And that is, are you open to consulting? Are you open to that interim engagement or role that you might be asked to play, which sometimes turns into a full-time role? I've had that as well with an individual. Bill was asked by a former colleague who had left the same company to come in because of a specific project. First, it was 60 days, then it was 120 days. Then I got a call and he said, I don't know, but I'm getting a sense they're trying to create a role for me. And I said, well, would you take it? And he was under a non-compete at the time. He said, probably in the interim, I would. And lo and behold, they ended up creating a vice president of sales and marketing. They'd never had that oversight kind of role in that particular company. And he ended up being hired and staying there for several years, where he then could leverage that to go on to the next thing. And this was after taking early retirement from his company because of a reorganization. So it is possible. If you have a lot to offer, take age out of the equation and think about what it is that you can offer, which is a lot when all things are considered.
And that definitely is a salient theme of our talk today. So thank you for reinforcing it with your advice and also your wonderful stories, Mark, including your personal adventure. Thank you.